If you find these horror stories enjoyable, then kindly consider giving us a like, as it will support us to continue our storytelling journey. All the seniors went on a camping and rafting trip to Maine. There were only about 90 students in my class. We were divided into cabins, with 4 of us in each cabin. The campsite was really nice. It was by a big lake at the base of a mountain. On the first night, some of the camp staff sat with us around a big campfire. They told us a disturbing story about a ghost that haunted the area. Long ago, this place used to belong to a wealthy family in the early 1900s. The owner's daughter tragically drowned in the river while sneaking around in the dark with her lover. They said that if you were in your cabin and heard the sound of rushing water, like a river, it meant she was outside, trying to lead you to the river. If you saw her light, you would be mesmerized, and she would lead you to the water where something bad might happen. The teachers told us this story just to make sure we didn't leave our cabins after bedtime. But they also said it wasn't real. I shared my cabin with 3 other girls, and on the first night, we stayed up late, laughing and chatting. Finally, we fell asleep around 3 a.m. Suddenly, I woke up because of a loud noise. It sounded like something big splashing in the water. Just so you know, the lake was quite far from our cabins. You had to walk for about 15 minutes to reach it, and the river was at least 3 or 4 miles away. I thought it was just a dream or something, so I didn't pay much attention to it. But a few minutes later, the loud sound happened again. I looked over and saw that 2 of the other girls were wide awake and really scared. One of them peeked out of the small window, but there was nobody there. We didn't sleep well that night. None of the other kids heard the noise, except for some boys in a cabin far from us. They told us they heard it around 1 a.m., right outside their cabin. When they woke up, they saw a bright light shining into their cabin. They looked out and saw a light flashing in the dark trees. We all went to talk to the people who ran the campground, but they said they had nothing to do with it. During the night, the teachers checked on us from time to time to make sure we were in our beds and not up to anything we shouldn't be doing. They told us they didn't see or hear anything strange. We didn't really believe them, and one of the girls in my cabin was so scared that she wanted to go home. She even called her mom to come pick her up. Remember, this trip cost us a lot of money, and we had paid for 3 days. The teachers tried to comfort her, and the campground staff offered to stay up with us to see if anything weird happened again. So, she decided to stay. The next night, the teachers watched outside our cabin, while the campground staff kept an eye on the boys' cabin. All the students were in their cabins, and one teacher kept checking to make sure nobody was out of bed. Nothing strange happened for a while, so I eventually fell asleep. It felt like only a few minutes later when one of my cabin mates screamed and pointed at the door. I turned and saw really long, dark, wet hair hanging in front of the window. The teachers rushed in, and a few minutes later, so did the campground staff. The other girl was crying, and her cries woke everyone up. We told them what we saw, but the campground staff said that no one else was staying there, and the teachers confirmed that everyone was in their cabins and nobody had wet hair. No one could sleep that night. On the last night, we all stayed in the main hall because we were too scared to sleep in the cabins. I had forgotten about this story until just now. I've always thought that maybe the teachers or campground workers were playing a mean trick on us. This story happened a while ago when I chose to go camping alone. I really enjoy camping by myself. It feels peaceful and calming to be all alone in the middle of nature. So I made a plan for the trail I wanted to take, gathered my camping stuff, and brought my rifle for safety. Then I hopped into my truck. I arrived at the trail early in the morning and hiked for about 15 to 20 miles until I found the right spot. I left the trail to find a place to set up my tent. I discovered a nice open area and thought it was a beautiful spot to make camp. I was very tired by then, but I managed to set up my tent at the far end of the open space near the line of trees. I also started a fire. I was cooking some hot dogs when I heard a noise far away in the woods. It sounded like an animal, probably a deer with a hurt leg, because it made a noise like something dragging. I felt sorry for the poor animal, but it was too far away and it was getting dark. I couldn't go look for it to help. I didn't think much about it and went back to eating my food. After finishing my meal, I put out the fire and went inside my tent. I got into my sleeping bag but wasn't really tired, so I took out a book I had brought and started reading by the light of my lamp. Many hours passed, and I heard that strange sound again. But this time it was closer, on the opposite side of the open area. It surprised me, so I put my book down and listened carefully as the noise got louder. It seemed like the animal was walking strangely, with heavy steps and a dragging sound, as if it had something stuck to it. The sound came closer and stopped in the middle of the open space. Then, it went completely silent. I unzipped my tent and looked outside, but all I could see were trees and darkness. It was really weird. Feeling uneasy, I zipped up the tent again and sat there, trying to listen for any other strange sounds. I heard nothing unusual, just the sounds of crickets and the wind. I tried not to let it bother me because the woods can have strange noises sometimes. Plus, I had my rifle with me. As I started to doze off, I heard men laughing in the distance to my right, followed by women laughing, and then the sound of sticks snapping far away to my left. I suddenly woke up and wondered if I was really hearing these things, or if it was just my half-asleep mind playing tricks on me. Then, I heard more faint laughter from different directions, from old people, young people, even children. I realized it was real, and the noises seemed to be getting closer. I grabbed my rifle, ready to shoot a warning shot into the air if they got too close. Something about the laughter, how deep into the woods I was, the strange noise earlier, and the late hour made me feel like this wasn't just a regular group passing through. I was already quite nervous, and then I noticed that all the night sounds had suddenly gone silent. Even the wind stopped making noise. That was enough for me. I unzipped the tent and fired a shot into the sky. I looked around, examining the line of trees, but I didn't see anything. I listened carefully to the sounds around me, and there was no more laughter. Just the normal sounds of the forest had returned. Feeling a bit more relaxed and thinking that I had scared away whoever was out there, I sat down. In my exhausted state, I eventually fell asleep. I woke up later, feeling really anxious and sweating even though it was still dark outside. I heard two people whispering not far from my tent. I got alert and quickly grabbed my rifle to listen to what they were saying. I couldn't hear much, but I caught something about being lost. So I shouted, "Hey, who's there?" The voices stopped talking. I shouted again, "Are you lost? Who's there?" Suddenly, a big burst of fire, like a flamethrower, shot up from the middle of the open area. It lit up several shapes of people just standing there. I was shocked, so I fired my rifle, making a hole in my tent, and everything went dark. Without checking my surroundings, I jumped out of my tent and ran to the left, trying to get back to the trail. I walked all the way back to my truck, keeping an eye behind me the whole time until the sun came up. I didn't hear anyone following me, and I didn't see anyone or anything on my way out, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that someone was watching me. After that, I didn't enjoy camping alone anymore, and I left all my gear in the woods that night. For my lady's birthday, I took her to Gatlinburg. It's a famous touristy town in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee with a long boardwalk. We spent the first night camping a few miles away in the woods at a popular place called Elkmont Campground. The campground was really nice, with tall green trees that looked like baby redwoods. a clear river with colorful rocks in it, and families with little kids playing around. It was a great experience. But when we got there, we realized we didn't have any tent stakes to keep our tent in place. So, we had to go into town to buy some supplies, whiskey, and hot dogs. By the time we got back to the campground, it was getting dark. Most of the other campers were either sitting around their fading campfires or cleaning up before nightfall. Our tent was still standing, but it was a bit squished without the stakes, so it couldn't open up as much as we wanted. So we fixed our tent and started a fire. As the night went on, we found ourselves sitting around our campfire about 2 to 3 hours later, at midnight. This campground was the kind where another campsite is really close to yours, only about 30 yards away. Bears are known to visit this area, and my girlfriend was getting a little scared, which is why I picked a site right in the middle of the campground. By this time, all the other campers had gone to sleep, and the only sounds we could hear were the crackling of our fire and the gentle noise of the river flowing over the rocks. The sky was cloudy, so there wasn't much moonlight. We had flashlights, and every so often I'd use the light to look around us, making sure we were safe and there were no bears. Out of the blue, from the campsite behind my girlfriend and to my left, a light suddenly shone right on us and then started moving around in a hurry, like the Eye of Sauron from a movie. I saw a guy with a strange way of walking. He had a headlight on and seemed really focused on his picnic table. The way he walked reminded me a bit of Jar Jar Binks, but it wasn't normal. I noticed that he kept his light on the picnic table, and whenever I looked in his direction, his light would immediately shine on my girlfriend and me. I could only see the man's shape because of his headlight, and he kept flashing his light at our campsite in a really unsettling way. This was the campsite right across from ours, and we hadn't seen anyone there the night before. I could only make out the outline of his body, all in black, like he was wearing a black suit. He kept doing the same things over and over again in a strange pattern. For almost an hour, he would shine his headlight on his picnic table, move his hands a little bit or not at all, then walk back to his tent, shine the light on it, and return to the picnic table. He'd shine his light at us and repeat the whole thing. If this guy was just looking for something, he seemed like he was on a bunch of drugs. When his light stayed on us for too long and made me uncomfortable, I shined my flashlight at him for a while. That's when things got really scary. I got a chill down my spine as I saw the man's outline disappear right in front of me. His headlight dropped to the ground. Then it seemed to move along the ground like it was running, kind of like a dog. I took my flashlight away, and his light slowly came back out of the bushes and went back up to the height of a person. The shadowy figure returned from the bushes and went back to doing the same strange stuff. Throughout the whole night, this figure didn't make any noise at all. Later, we went into our tent to go to sleep, and the shadowy man was still doing his weird routine. The next day, the tent from the man's campsite was gone, like he was never there. I found out that there was a small town called Ghost Town, just a mile from our campsite, with abandoned buildings and a cemetery up a trail. I couldn't find any other stories about the Elkmont campground mysteries, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are more stories about the Headlight Man.